Hi guys, welcome back to Cooking with Oki. I'm Oki, of course. Today we're going to change it up a little bit. Instead of doing a cooking video, we are going to do an instructional video. And I'm being very, what's the word I'm looking for here? Precise when I say instructional. Because we are going to cover the Torah for what is and is not food. And I'm going to be reading from the scriptures, and I do believe it's the 2009 version. I know there's another version. That's not the one I've got on my iPad. But we're going to be reading from it. So, bear with me. Listen, take notes, read along, whatever's good for you. And we're going to cover some stuff. And then I've got a question at the end that I'm going to ask y'all. And please, let me know what you think. And go from there. So we're going to begin. It's Leviticus 11. And I'm not even going to try to say the Hebrew name for that. I've got it here. I'm not a Hebrew person. If it was German, I could handle it. But Hebrew, not so much. But we're going to just bear with me here. If there's any pronunciation issues, whatever, I apologize. And no, it's not confusing or nothing. I'm sitting in front of a fan. Cold front hasn't made it to us yet, so it's still pretty warm in my house. Anyways, let us begin. Like I said, Leviticus 11, and we're just going to read the whole thing. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, saying to them, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are the living creatures which you do eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Whatever has a split hoof completely divided, chewing the cud, among the beasts that you do eat. Only these you do not eat among those that chew the cud, or those that have a split hoof. The camel, because it chews the cud, but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. And the rabbit, because it chews the cud, but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. And the hare, because it chews the cud, but does not have a split hoof, it is unclean to you. And the pig, though it does have a split hoof, completely divided, yet does not chew the cud, it is unclean to you. Their flesh you do not eat, and their carcasses you do not touch, they are unclean to you. These you do eat of all that are in the waters, any one that has fins and scales in the waters, in the seas or in the rivers, that you do eat. But all that have not fins and scales, in the seas and in the rivers, all that move in the waters, or any living being which is in the waters, they are an abomination to you. They are an abomination to you. Of their flesh you do not eat, and their carcasses you abominate. All that have not fins or scales in the waters are an abomination to you. And these you do abominate among the birds, they are not eaten, they are an abomination. The eagle, and the vulture, and the black vulture, and the hawk, and the falcon after its kind, every raven after its kind, and the ostrich, and the nighthawk, and the seagull, and the hawk after its kind, and the little owl, and the fisher owl, and the great owl, and the white owl, and the pelican, and the carrion vulture, and the stork, the heron after its kind, and the hoopoe, and the bat. All flying insects that creep on all fours is an abomination to you. Only these you do eat of every flying insect that creeps on all fours. Those which have jointed legs above their feet, with which to leap on the earth. These of them you do eat. The arbe locust after its kind, and the solam locust after its kind, and the hargol locust after its kind, and the hagab locust after its kind. But all other flying insects which have 4 feet are an abomination to you. And by these you are made unclean. Anyone touching the carcass of any of them is unclean until evening. And anyone picking up part of the carcass of any of them that has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean until evening. Every beast that has a split hoof not completely divided, or does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. Anyone who touches their carcass is unclean. and whatever goes on its paws among all the creatures that go on all fours, those are unclean to you. Anyone who touches their carcass is unclean until evening. And he who picks up their carcass has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean until evening. They are unclean to you. And these are unclean to you among the creeping creatures that creep on the earth, the mole and the mouse and the tortoise after its kind, and the gecko and the land crocodile and the sand reptile and the sand lizard and the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Anyone who touches them when they are dead becomes unclean until evening. And whatever any of them in its dead state falls upon becomes unclean, whether it is any wooden object or garment or skin or sack, any object in which work is done, it is put in water, and it shall be unclean until evening, then it shall be clean. Any earthen vessel into which any of them falls, whatever is in it becomes unclean, and you break it. Any of the food which might be eaten on which water comes becomes unclean, and any drink which might be drunk from it becomes unclean. And on whatever any of their carcass falls becomes unclean. An oven or a cooking range, it is broken down. They are unclean and are unclean to you. But a fountain or a well, hang on a second. Okay. I wanted to highlight that section about the cooking range and the oven because we're going to go back to that. But a fountain or a well, a collection of water, is clean, but whatever touches their carcass is unclean. And when any of their carcass falls on any planting seed which is to be sown, it is clean. But any water is put on the seed, and any part of any such carcass falls on it, it is unclean to you. And when any of the beasts which are yours for food dies, he who touches its carcass becomes unclean until evening. And he who eats of its carcass has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean until evening. And he who picks up its carcass has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean until evening. I'll highlight that too, because I have another thought there. And every swarming creature, the one that swarms on the earth, is an abomination. It is not eaten. Whatever crawls on its stomach, and whatever goes on all fours, and whatever has many feet among all swarming creatures, the ones swarming on the earth, these you do not eat, for they are an abomination. Do not make yourselves abominable with any swarming creature, the one swarming, and do not make yourselves unclean with them, lest you be defiled by them. For I am Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall set yourselves apart, and you shall be set apart, for I am set apart. And do not defile yourselves with any swarming creature, the one creeping on the earth. For I am Yahweh, who is bringing you up out of the land of Mitzrayim, to be your Elohim. And you shall be set apart, for I am set apart. This is the Torah of the beasts and the birds and every living being, the creeping creature in the waters, and of every being that swarms on the earth, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living creature that is eaten and the living creature that is not eaten. So there we go. That's Leviticus 11. There are some other dietary laws in the Torah that aren't part of this, but they're still there nonetheless. Like the part about eating a lamb with its mother's milk, or a calf with its mother's milk, or whatever it is. I can't remember exactly. And so for the kosher laws, which are not specifically what the Torah calls for, it's one of those, what is it, dogma of man, or whatever you want to call it. It's an above and beyond limitation that man has imposed on what the actual scripture says. And so with the kosher part, the Jews will not eat meat and dairy together. Well, that's not what the Torah is talking about, because it's specific here. It says don't eat a child, a lamb, calf, whatever, with its mother's milk. And we know it's being specific there because we've got historical accounts of other groups doing like sacrificial practices and stuff in their temples to their puny little gods, about where they would sacrifice the animal and the mom and cook the young in the mother's milk. That's actually a thing that they did. I don't know if anybody still does. It's freaking disgusting and abominable. But So it's specifically talking about that. It's not talking about having cheese on a burger. Two different things entirely. Anyways, so what I wanted to go back to you here on is Leviticus 11:35, and on I'm stuttering here. Hang on. And on whatever any of their carcass falls becomes unclean, an oven or cooking range, it is broken down. They are unclean and unclean to you. And it also talks about, you can wash stuff with water, but except for earthen vessels. Now, we know that earthen vessels are porous. You can't actually wash them with soap and water. There is always a little bit of stuff that remains in there. Cast iron is very similar. There is a process, but you can't clean it with water. You have to clean it with fire. And so, with the cast iron, a lot of old cast irons were treated with lard. So you've got to strip that stuff all the way down to bare metal and re-season it. I believe that's okay, because you are using a prescribed method of cleaning as far as what the Torah calls for, and that's either water or fire, right? Well, we know water doesn't work, but fire does. So, but we're getting to the 1135, where it talks about the cooking ranges, and it has to be broken down if unclean things get on there. Now, it's specifically talking about just above it, like rodents and stuff. So you can extrapolate, though. It's also talking about unclean things getting onto cookware and earthen stuff and whatnot. You have to destroy it if it's in an earthen vessel. Well, their ovens and little cooking setups and whatnot back then were made out of clay. So it makes perfect sense. You would have to destroy them and build a new one. Today, it's all made out of metal. Well, you can't just break that down. It's not made out of clay, so the prescription would be to wash it, right? And that's to a point. Now, but my thought is on this, what about restaurants? Because a lot of your restaurants, burger restaurants is what I'm thinking of predominantly, a lot of them, especially around here, use flat top grills. So it's just a big sheet of steel or cast iron, one or the other, and it's just a big cooktop. They cook pork on there along with your meat that you get. So say Joe Blow 10 minutes ago ordered a bacon cheeseburger, okay? So pork was cooked on there. And then you come along and you keep the dietary laws and you just order a regular cheeseburger. But it's still cooked on the same surface 10 minutes ago. And even if you hit that with steam and clean it and try your best to actually clean it, which the majority of your restaurant workers don't do that, I can promise you. Even if you steam clean it, you're not getting all of that residue off of there. And I can tell you that from plenty of experience. You got to scrub the hell out of that grill to get it clean. Nobody does that in the middle of the day. So, and when we know, because the fire is on the bottom of that metal, it's not purifying the top of that metal. So, and this is one of those things where I think you're not held accountable to the wisdom until it's you're not necessarily held accountable to it until you know about it. Well, now I'm telling you. So this is something where you might want to prayerfully consider not eating out at restaurants that serve pork at all. Simply because that stuff's going to be cooked right alongside your other stuff, and it's not going to be cleaned to the extent that the Torah calls for stuff to be sanitary after coming into contact with unclean things. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Hopefully that helps you. I know for us, we've come to that realization over the past month or two, just really thinking about that and having it pressed on me, and it's like I've been needing to make this video for a minute now. But we've stopped eating out at a lot of places. And one of the things where it hit me is we were at the hibachi, and, we do our thing. We try our best to, be at our own thing where we don't have to worry about sitting next to other people that might order shrimp is the big one, or shrimp and lobster are the two big ones at the hibachi that we have to worry about going on the grill. And unfortunately, we were there, we were eating, and of course, we tried to make sure that, the shrimp were on the other side of the grill and whatnot, so it wasn't a cross-contamination contact issue there. But it just really got me to thinking, is like, even when we went to that step, there's still, a little bit of cross-contact, cross-contamination, whatever the terminology you want to use for this. Those are both actually industry terms, but they are slightly different things. But however you want to colloquially put it, anyways, there's still a little bit of transmission going on there, I think. And so we've stopped here a few months ago. We stopped going to hibachi places for this very reason, is because there is that thing. And even when you don't mean to sin, sometimes the sin still happens. And so it's like, okay, now we're aware of it, now we're going to be held accountable to it. So that's why I'm sharing it with you guys. And then the other thing that I picked up here was on 1140. And he who eats of its carcass has to wash his garments. Or hold on. Let me back up to 39 here, because context matters. And when any of the beasts which are food for you dies, he who touches its carcass becomes unclean until evening. So you got to take care of a dead body, whatever, I get that. But then it says, and he who eats of its carcass has to wash his garments and he'll be clean and shall be unclean until evening. So right there is my question. If something that you are raising to be food dies before you slaughter it, can you still eat it? Because I know there's rules elsewhere about eating things that died under certain circumstances. You can't eat it. Some certain circumstances you can eat it. Something to think about. It's just something that stuck in my mind here while I was eating it. Because I know there's an answer to that question. I just don't remember it right off the top of my head. But anyways. So yeah. I'd really be considering not eating out at places that serve pork. Just bar none. Wouldn't do it. Another thing that gets you too. A lot of your fried chicken places, they use lard in their fryer oil. Popeyes is the big one that sticks out on me, because that chicken sandwich that Popeyes came up with a few years ago was damn delicious. And then I found out after eating one that it had lard in the oil. I didn't know that. And so, yeah, quit doing that. Another one, certain steakhouses and other just general restaurants, but steakhouses are a big one. They'll use bacon grease to coat their baked potatoes when they cook their baked potatoes. And it's like the restaurant industry, I mean, it's all about, saving a buck to maximize profits and all that. And also, it's one of those things, recipe-wise maximizes flavor, and I get that, but while it's one thing for the regular people, it's not okay for us. And so it's one of those things to be mindful of. What are the practices back house? Maybe you should ask, maybe you should learn, everybody's got to do their own thing, where they're at, what they got, and all that, So that's what I got for you tonight. We're in the process of packing up. We're getting ready to move. And we'll have a new kitchen and a new, studio, whatever you want to call it, I guess. I'll try to get some more videos put up. But we'll do what we can do with what we got, Them's the rules, I guess. Anyways. So, hopefully this was good for you. Hit me up on Patreon if you want to, kick a buck my way or so. Help me out. Making cooking videos is not the cheapest thing in the world. My next video will probably be on how to make meatballs. I've been working on a beef and lamb meatball recipe that's really good. And I've been kind of doing the R&D on that on the backside. That stuff just takes time. And so I don't want to bring it to y'all until I've got it figured out, so that I can give y'all something good versus just giving you something that might be 50-50, and it's more of my technique that figures it out and all that. So I just got to figure it all out first. and then I'll give it to you. But what I've got, I think I've got about nailed down, and it's dang delicious, and we'll have that up here before too long once I'm able to film it. I can't think of anything else, so yeah, hit me up on Patreon. I've got an Amazon affiliate thing now, and so when I'm using stuff, if you think it might be useful, hit up my Amazon link and get you some of that stuff. It doesn't cost you anymore. It just kicks me a percentage off stuff that sells if it's something I present to y'all and y'all use my link. So that's just another way you can support me. Other than that, like, share, do all those things. And just remember, if you can't be good, at least be good at it. And we'll catch y'all next time. Be safe.